Welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, coming on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today, and been catching fire again early, sort of as we move into the early springtime, getting a chance to interview some really iconic figures, big name figures in the world of melodic improvisation, guys like John Scofield, Peter Erskine, but it's always good to be able to go back and sort of dig around in the more rootsy Bay Area, East Bay, greasy area that produced so many incredible players, a lot of self-taught players, but also guys that really just learned on the bandstand, a lot of cutting sessions, and at the same time, they still led with an open heart. A lot of my generation, younger, especially younger generations, they'll be very cool with you up to a certain point, but then down the road, if you're involved with something and they don't perceive it, that there's something in it for them, the relationship become fractured. And not to say that there wasn't shady stuff that went down in my guest's career, but it seemed to me that when people got bands together, when John Cipollina got a band together, he was doing it for fun. He was doing it so that guys could get off and play together, maybe make a little bit of dough. But there wasn't some agenda. There wasn't some sort of dubious sort of thing going on. And ultimately, that's why the music felt so good, no matter what the genre. Greg Douglas, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Oh, it's great to be here.
You know, I wanted to ask you about how often do you get a chance to play with younger cats?
Well, it's there's a thing here in San Diego. Where do you live, Jake?
I'm in Tucson. I'm going to come see you very soon, by the way. There's actually an amazing twin brothers called the Matson 2. Have you ever heard of them?
No.
They live in they live right near you, and they are. It's a drum and guitar, and they're probably in their late 20s. They're twins, and it is the most raw, freakish, crazy stuff. Anyway, you would be hip to them. Go ahead.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You know what?
Matson 2, Matson.
Got it.
Yeah.
I missed it by one letter. I got the O in there now. Younger guys. Well, I got plugged into this thing called the Six String Society. There's a guy named Kenneth Rexroad who has been doing these shows for the past, probably 10 years at this point. I came in around 7 years ago as a special guest and have done a number of shows with much, much younger people. There's a kid here in town named Anthony Collins who is just an absolute freak. He's a prodigy.
Anthony Collins, yeah.
Cullins, Cullins, Cullins. You're going to be hearing a lot from this guy, and he's got that gunslinger mentality that I kind of, I explained to him at one point. I said, dude, because every time we'd get on stage, he'd say, okay, man, we're going to get up there and cut heads. We're going to cut heads. And I said, Anthony, I kind of stopped doing contests, and I just play music now. So why don't we just get up there and play some?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, he's young, and young.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what did you say to him? Man, why don't we just play music?
Yeah, I said, let's get up there and play together, man. And he's really mellowed out. He just invited me to play on his new album as a guest, which was very, very generous of him. And another thing that happened, speaking of kids, there was a band called Daring Greatly that started off as a father and his sons and a couple of other people who had this fabulous, that DNA harmony, that harmony that comes about when it's in the blood, like the Everly Brothers, or and played a lot with them, just sitting in. And at one point, their guitarist could not get out of Canada. They're all from Canada. So I went on tour with them for a month, going up to the Pacific Northwest. And it was quite a trip because I'm 72 years old.
Bless
These
you.
kids are in their early 20s, and they were all hockey players. They're very competitive. So, I'd be trying to get to sleep. They'd be out there playing beer pong till 2 in the morning. And I ended up sleeping with this guy that was kind of their manager slash financier. And, I wake up to this guy that's older than me. And I said, this is not what I signed up for. I mean, it's great on stage, but we ended up winning a contest to open up for Bon Jovi
No
in Las
way.
Vegas.
Wait, I mean, what kind of music? It's just like straight rock kind of stuff. What kind of music would you?
Straight rock, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
these guys, they're really incredible. I mean, the vocals are the thing in this band. They're just unbelievable. And I just, I did my thing.
Well, I just want to be clear though. Once you won the contest, did you actually get to sleep in a hotel room and didn't have to worry about their noise?
I, they drove back in this van, which I call the penalty box, and
Yes, that's very good.
my wife drove to Las Vegas, and we slept in a real hotel, and we never she never does any drugs, and I rarely, if ever, do them anymore, and so she brought some edibles along, and we went and saw the Beatles show.
Wow. Oh, the movie.
And we just had a great time. And I said it's so great to be around somebody who wants to go to bed before midnight, and we had a great time.
But I guess maybe my question, because it wasn't even about like, I just wonder, do you think their commitment to the art itself was as strong as your generation, or are there just so many more distractions, and quite frankly, it's just so much harder to actually make a living singing for your supper as a bandstand musician? Do you see that commitment, or are they sort of like, hey man, I got to wear 8 hats. I got to do social media. I got to do promotion, and I got to play a show. Things that you didn't even have to worry about. You guys were really just honed in on the music itself.
Oh, we were spoiled. We were, I mean, I just came back from a recording session, and I told the guy, I said, if this was 1975, you would be farting through silk. I said, this is what you have here is a hit song, and no place for it to go.
That is such a hard. Okay, so right now, just talk about that. You would have gotten radio play on regional radio. Talk about why, not why it's a hit song, but how it would have gotten out to the people, or at least regional people in '75.
Well, I mean, it could still get out to regional people, and I hope it will. But the chances of getting an actual record deal are slim and none. I mean, record. What?
Yeah, there is no industry anymore. There is
no music business anymore. The music business is. I'm so fortunate that I got in when I got in, and I'm still making significant amounts of money from that time period.
God bless you, bro. Dude, you know what? I mean, I'm just saying, does it break your heart a little bit? That you can go home and you're getting royalty checks, and you've been taken care of, and you worked your ass off to do it. It's like, and let's be clear. I mean, I've sort of turned the corner in terms of going to see music since last summer. I've been on the road a little bit, and this is the question I have for you. Was there the gap right now, or I'll just throw out some bands, like there are bands right now coming out of COVID that are going to be able to play cushy tours based on the fact that they have name recognition. Little Feat,
Yep.
Bonnie Raitt, okay,
Sure.
Jackson Brown. Okay, so they'll
Yeah.
have the first class. They have nice hotels and meals and per diem maybe, and just kind of cream of the crop. Farting through silk, as you said, and then you have the organic creatives, the country weathers of the day in my generation, really intense bands, original music, and the only way that they can even make any money, and what is left after everything I don't even know, is getting on a big bus and doing 30 shows in 34 days.
That's it.
It's
And
grueling,
selling
man,
art.
and it's grueling, and that's it. And I just wonder when you go back to your time with, any band you did extensive. I don't know. I mean, Steve Miller's not a good example because Steve could go out and tour prolifically if he wanted to because of his name right now. But just
Yeah, but
was there as big a gap between the name recognized people and the underbelly when you were coming up in the late '60s? It just seems to me now it's almost the music industry is not over. It's just only the big fish that get a piece of it.
right. But you have to understand the COVID crisis is not over. I just spoke with
Hmm.
Steve about this.
Hmm.
When he goes out, he has to take 25 people on the road with him. Chances are at least one of those people is going to get really ill, and he has to be ready for that. So he's taking a huge, huge risk when he goes out on the road. So the big cats are not immune to
Sure, that's
this
right.
this unbrave new world. It's
Yeah.
it's very difficult for them too. But yeah, like you said, newer bands, the only way to make money, downloads, but the competition's fierce. There's a million country weathers out there.
Well, and then also let's be clear, a million downloads gets you about $5,000,
Yeah,
and like that can happen for some. And that's the other part of it. Is just, I mean, back in the day, if they had Spotify or if they had downloads for your generation, there had to
yep,
be a certain bar of quality to get that. Like nowadays, cats that are getting a million hits can't even perform live. They've been dialed up or they've been, all the auto tuning. So, like, that's even the
yep,
worst part about it is that authentic music is getting passed by because of somebody's looks or their Twitter following, things like that. So,
right.
I mean, hey, listen, the Jazzers starved to death. There's been a lot of shady stuff throughout the years. What do you, so I get it. Like Steve has a big entourage. Like he has a big machine that he has to move, to get on tour.
It has to happen. Yeah.
What is the best? What do you think are some of the ways that live music? I'm being very serious, man. I mean, the
I am
domestic.
too.
I know you are. The domestic touring circuit in this country is like Swiss cheese now. I mean, it's very up and down. We're so divided as a country. The cats won't even go into red states, and on top of that, you're just talking about the fact that the pandemic hasn't really turned the corner yet. But is there any sort of glimpse on the horizon, something that you sort of hold your hat on? Because ultimately, the greatest thing about the generation before you and your generation was like most cats, Yorma, Haggerty, people like that, they want to pass it forward, right? I mean, you want to
Yep.
play it forward, man. Like, do you see a silver lining somewhere? Because you've been on this earth a lot longer than me.
Hmm. Well, Hag. First of all, you brought up that name.
Yeah,
He was one of the older guys to me when I was coming up. I
absolutely.
was, yeah, and he came to me after watching me play, and he said, "You're going to be a great guitar player someday." He said, "You're not there yet, but he says you have the makings of a great guitarist."
Hmm.
And I couldn't believe he was talking to me. And many years later, we did a mini tour in the Bay Area, and it was one of the great privileges of my life to be playing with one of my heroes. I mean, he's one of the greatest guitar players in the world, as far as I'm concerned.
Hmm.
Um, so as far as paying what I'm doing right now, I'm leaving on oh boy, April 20th,
Mm,
and I'm going to England. I have what is it, you can't call it a tribute band because I was in the band. It's a Steve Miller tribute band, but it's called the Pompatus of Love.
mm.
I'm doing it because, frankly, I need the money. Second of all, I need to get out and play.
Exactly. You got to get stuff out of your system.
Yeah, I need to get up in front of people and have them go, yay, because that's the whole reason I
I
started this
dig,
thing.
man. I dig.
I worked 2 nights ago with one of the greatest classical players in the world. This guy, Fred Benedetti, and I talked to the guy who booked the show, and he said, "Is there any stipulations?" I said, "Yeah, don't make me go on after Fred. I'm not going to do it." And it turned out he had the same trepidations about me, which is really funny. It made us both laugh that we both had that same sort of insecurity. And a wonderful guy. We're going to do some more shows together. So there is a scene out there. You just have to, Jake. You have to adapt. You have to
Absolutely.
adapt.
No, I mean, thank God. Like, I just, to me, it's so, for you guys who came up in the gravy years of the studio scene,
Hmm.
touring, the opportunity to write a song, to get it radio play, for it to turn into a hit. All this stuff was very real, and it really paid off. But for people that just were like kind of, it was never. But they were very busy before COVID, and now, and maybe they were playing like a second, third tier theaters and things like that. I mean, they've kind of had to take a step down. I just don't know how cats are going to actually continue to be make money as musicians to make a living. I mean, I think that, I mean, there's always been side gigs. People have had side gigs, but anyway, let's get down to brass tacks here. I connected with this cat, and the floor is yours. I want you to talk because there were two guys that were, and like you said, Hags was, he's an elder to you,
Yeah.
and and his father was a great guitar teacher and an amazing player, and I connected with Larry Murphy. Okay, and I did
Oh,
2 interviews with Larry, and I need you to talk about Larry Senior, man, because that dude, I could spend 4 hours just hearing you. I will just shut up. Please talk about how
yeah.
you met him and talk. He was apparent. That's what Larry told me in one of our interviews. He said, as a music teacher, he taught Barry Melton, The Fish, Country Joe, Greg Douglas, Joe Rubino, and Bobby Winkleman at Webb's Music Center in Antioch. Anyway,
Yep.
the floor is yours.
How many hours do you have? Okay,
Dude. I mean, this is really where I mean, it was so to know that him and Hags' dad were like the two baddest cats.
yep.
Really, I mean, that to me is like folklore to me. That is folklore.
It absolutely. I mean, my first guitar teacher was such a drag. He wanted me to be the next Wes Montgomery, and I wanted to be the next Keith Richards. I wanted to be the next George Harrison, and he put down that music and said I was an idiot for playing it. And he'd spend 20 minutes out of a 30-minute lesson talking on the payphone, trying to get a gig at the Elks Lodge. I hated the guy, man. I got to the point where I hated him, although he did teach me a lot of the basics. And
But
I went back.
you wouldn't conform to what he wanted you to become. So
No.
yeah, exactly. Forget it.
So it was miserable for both of us. So I just told him, I said, look, I'm going to go ahead. I got a band that wants me to be their guitar player. And fortunately, this guy did teach me a lot, but his attitude was awful. So years later, I was still with Country Weather, and I felt this desperate need to go forward, to go to the next level, to find out something new. And somebody said, you need to go talk to this guy, Larry Murphy, at Webb's Music. Going to Webb's Music was like going to some sort of guitar nirvana. They had everything, man. That's the first time I ever saw a flying V, and I laughed at it. I said, "That's the silliest looking guitar I've ever seen." And I wish I had bought that thing now. But
it was probably a better deal back then too,
I'd be just a touch.
Yeah.
Larry was truly a genius, and I mean that in every possible way. He was a musical genius. He was a sweetheart of a guy, and he did not talk down to me. He never talked down to me once. He talked to me as an equal. He talked to me as a guitarist, and that meant so much to me. As a matter of fact, I used to, as I recall, I think I used to bring in pot for him from the guy that he used to buy pot
I
from.
freaking love this. This is so classic. Can you give an example of him talking to you, not at you or down to you, and and ultimately sort of just his approach? Because it wasn't, you kind of had the rudiments already. So what did he help you with that helped you stretch out?
He taught me these unorthodox ways of doing things. First of all, he was one of the first people to ever use a string bender. He invented it before Clarence White invented his. And it was just marvelous because he could do all these pedal steel licks. But here's an example of a conversation that Larry and I had. He was talking about, I was talking about Jeff Beck. I said, "Oh, Jesus Christ, I had to go on after Jeff Beck the other night. I had to step on the same stage as Jeff Beck after he got done.
Yeah,
and I just wanted to cut my fingers off and flush them down the damn toilet." And he said, "You know what, Greg? I was listening to Howard Roberts the other night. And, I'd smoked a blunt." He didn't call it a blunt. He called it a joint. And he said, "I started crying because I knew I could never do that." And it completely flipped me out because that's such an honest thing to say. And that's the way so many guitarists feel. And it made me feel like he felt comfortable enough with me as a human being and a musician to bring out his own insecurities. And that was a huge step forward in our relationship.
Greg Douglas making my day with that story. That's what the Jake Feinberg Show is all about.
Well,
that to me, and I'm not a musician, so it's easy for, as a broadcaster, I don't worry about, who's following me or who's on before me. You're telling me that most cats really have huge anguish about being because of the comparison thing? I mean, I would assume you reach a certain level where you stop comparing yourself, but maybe, I guess I'm wrong. I guess I'm just naive.
I'm there. Yeah, I've reached that.
Okay, you've reached that point. Okay. Yeah.
I reached that a while back. I just said, and part of that is, because I had, as we spoke of last time, I had problems with chemicals. Being in recovery made me realize that what other people think of me is none of my business. And that has spilled over into the way that I feel about myself as a guitarist. So, I would step on stage with Eric Clapton and have no problem with it whatsoever.
I love this. But what about, so the fact that you had to get straight, short, if you hadn't had to go through that, do you think you would still be insecure?
Well, I still am insecure sometimes.
But I mean, now, like, but that fundamentally sort of, you said, stay in your lane, stop worrying about other people's stuff, and just, worry about your own stuff.
Yeah. No, I think that being in recovery made it necessary for me to dig deep and see what was really going on with me. And I had such terrible. I would look at my platinum records, and it was like they belonged to somebody else.
Hmm.
And I worked with a particular counselor who said, "You know what, man? That's such." He called it what it was. He said, "That's stupid. That's just stupid. You're being an idiot. You didn't get those because you're a lame guitarist. You got them because you deserved them." And it was the first time in 30 years where I said, "Yeah, yeah, those are mine."
Hmm. Now
I
let me
just
ask you: were you just were so you look at them and say that I don't even recognize the person who did that
Yep,
stuff?
yep,
I got it.
yep. I got one more Larry
No,
Murphy.
dude, take as much. I mean, I just want to know if like to me, uh, tell your story, but also ultimately, um, like when after you kind of finished up, like so you took lessons from him, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So,
So like, where were you before, and then as a player, where were you after?
oh, I was light years ahead. He
Hmm.
taught me a technique where I used my pick and my fingers, and I practiced. I was practicing 4 to 6 hours a day on his stuff because I wanted to reach that level.
Hmm.
The Chet Atkins, Jerry Reed. One week I came in and I played a Chet Atkins tune, and he looked at me and he just kind of stared and he said, "You played that better than I can." And I said, "Well, Larry, I've been doing it all week. I've been doing it for hours every day. Of course, I'm." He said, "No, no, you played it better than me. You play it better than I can. So we're gonna stop lessons." And I was heartbroken. I took it personally. I said, "Larry, did I do something wrong?" He said, "No." He said, "You need to realize you reached a point where you're not just a student anymore. You're competition."
Wow.
And
Wow. What was that? 70?
I
What year was that? 73?
oh God, that was like yeah, 70, probably something like that.
Right.
And little did I know, he did me one of the greatest favors that anybody's ever done for me in my entire career. Once the word got out that I got the boot from Larry Murphy, the same thing happened to Joe Rubino, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And the word got out. It was like, "Oh shit, Greg got Greg got booted by Larry because Larry said he played better than he did." The phone started ringing off the hook. And
Now that is the pipeline. Right? There was a pipeline there.
yep, it was a gift. We were talking about the elders
Yeah.
and insecurity. All that is summed up right there in that story. And my only regret about Larry Murphy is that he died before I got a chance to to hug him and shake his hand and to thank him for all that he did for me. I still use Larry Murphy techniques every day.
I feel his spirit here right now, and he will be here. This will go out into the intergalactic, and these words are a semblance of closure, man. I'm sure you haven't really talked about him a lot lately. So,
Uh,
I mean, the guy was like just I mean, I didn't know him. I wasn't even around, but I mean, he was an avatar, really
he
intense
was.
dude, man.
Yeah, and his son picked up the ball, man. His
Larry
son.
Bird, and he's a dear friend and a brilliant musician in his own right. And he had a great. Did you know Hags' dad at all?
Um, I met
Was
him.
it Frank? I think was his name.
Yep,
Yeah.
and he, I he I believe he picked up his L5 and played Flight of the
Oh,
Bumblebee
you
behind
told me that
his
story.
neck.
No, that was like you guys were jamming, and
Yeah,
he came home and was like, "Look at you two," and he started playing that Flight of the Bumblebee behind his back or behind his head.
yeah. I was like, what is this horse shit you guys are playing? And it was an Irish family. Hag smoked pot like his dad drank.
Right.
Um, yeah, Hags is as you know one of my heroes. So
Brother Douglas, we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I don't expect you to know who this is, but just pay attention to the content, and we'll come back and break it down.
okay.
We were listening to Miles Davis and Tony Williams and Elvin Jones and John Coltrane obsessively, like all day and all night. For 4 years, there was almost no other music.
Right.
But because of the money and the audiences they were trying to get us, they were starting to have rock and roll bands. Muddy Waters and those guys came out and did Newport, where they did a festival out in California. I forget which one, a jazz festival. And now they're starting to have rock bands. Those guys were blues, but then so the clubs were, even jazz clubs were asking, can you play some boogaloo? Can you play this, play that? So we didn't want to play straight funk like you heard on the radio, because we were jazz musicians. We could improvise, play changes, swing, and do all this stuff. So we right away married the two things together. It was just, nobody ever said to do it that way. As soon as, like, maybe we played ahead of Mercy Mercy, and when the guy would go into his piano or saxophone solo, we'd start blowing. It just seemed like we weren't going to play straight time. There was no singer to back up or anything,
Exactly.
So then a group, the Fourth Way, with Eddie Marshall and Mike Knott, came up around that area. Paul and I were getting very popular, and we were infiltrating all kinds of bands with our type of rhythm and understanding. And I was listening to Elvin and Tony and Philly Joe. Now he sings, now he sobs, with Chick Corea, Miroslav, and Roy Haynes. Just whatever, every record that came out was huge. Then Lenny White, a friend of mine, who was a dear friend of mine, did Red Clay.
Of course.
And right after that, I started subbing with Bobby Hutcherson and Woody Shaw when he couldn't make it, so I subbed for him on those gigs. And I got Paul on those gigs as an upright bass player. So all of that stuff was starting to blend without anybody ever. We never verbalized it. Nobody said, get funky. The term, let's play some funk, that nobody ever said, let's play some funk. They would say, I made a mistake there, they would say, let's get funky on this one, but funk was not a genre yet. Nobody said, let's play some funk.
All right, my brother. I played that for you because I'm I know you're from that East Bay area. That was my first interview with the drummer Mike Clark. He played with Paul Jackson in the Headhunters. Did you get a chance to see Herbie's band and I guess the point that the reason I played you that clip was because in the late 60s, early 70s, the genre funk was not in the lexicon.
No,
It was a let's play some funky blues or let's get funky, but there was no let's play some funk. And I just wonder, like, when was your first funky funk gig, and were you hip to like that Herbie Hancock, that early 70s? Did you see that band?
no, I didn't. I didn't see the band. I did listen to a lot of Miles Davis. I listened to a lot of Kenny Burrell. But you wouldn't call it funk.
No.
I listened to the Crusaders. Now that was a funky
Dude,
band.
are you so you listened to the Crusaders after they dropped the Jazz Crusaders, or
Yes.
yeah, that's funk right there. I agree.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, as funky as I ever got was I did a session with James Brown's band.
What?
Their guitarist, yeah, I knew Pee Wee Herman.
Pee Wee Ellis.
Pee Wee Ellis. I fucked up.
I knew Pee Wee Herman.
Could I possibly have
It's okay, Pee Wee, man. We did. You knew Pee Wee. I did.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Pee Wee Ellis.
How did you? First of all, before you go on, how did you even know him?
Oh, I knew him from a band called Chuck Vincent and Shuffle.
Oh dear. Now we're going into something here. What? I've never heard of that.
Well, and you probably never will. The Chuck owned Bear West Studios that was across the street from the 2 a.m. Club
Wow.
in San Francisco,
Wow.
which is where all the guys from the Chronicle would go after work and get hammered. And
This was in the city. This was in the city. It's in the city proper. Yeah. Okay.
Yep, right around the corner from the Chronicle building, and so yeah, I did a lot of sessions there with different people. Met some great people who went on to become very successful. Chris Hayes was the original guitar player for
Huey Lewis. That's right.
Yeah, he was the original guitar player for Shuffle, and
For this guy Now, who's this guy Vincent? This is really fascinating to me.
Chuck Vincent was a bass player / singer / coke dealer / expatriate from Florida. And he came here to San Francisco in a band called Osceola. And that was the name, I believe it was the name of the county he came from. And
Absolutely.
it was also an Indian tribe.
Yep.
So it was a very funky band. We had a guy named John Turk playing drums.
Dude, wait. Stop right there. Wait. Because the John Turk, rest in peace, that I know, was a B3 trumpet player out of Oakland.
No, different guy.
Another John Turk?
Another John Turk.
I'll continue. He played drums. He must have been like Clyde Stubble. He was playing real funky, kind of syncopated stuff.
I'm hoping I'm not screwing this up.
Yeah, because John Turk was...
No, you're right. John Turk played trumpet.
Yes, dude! Oh, my God. John Turk lives, man.
Yep.
Holy shit.
I can't... the drummer's last name was Levi.
Okay. Levi?
Levi.
Wow.
As in, he was... I don't know if he was a black Jew.
So Turk Turk was in the band, trumpet.
Turk was in the band.
Douglas was on guitar.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is unbelievable.
And then we had this bass player, Chuck, and I played guitar, and Pee Wee Ellis.
Oh,
not Herman.
Pee Wee
played.
Now was this pre Van Morrison, pre Country Weather? Or
after? No, way after.
Way after. Okay, continue. So anyway, so that's how you met Pee Wee, and then continue.
Got a call one night from Pee Wee who said, "Greg, I got most of the cats from James's band here in town, and the guitar player couldn't make the gig. Can you come down to the studio?" And I said, "Sure." So. That was I got so many weird sessions, man. I did a session with an African guy named Prince Johnny Hostrup.
Yeah, I kind of know that. Oh my God.
Oh yeah, Prince.
So what was? Tell me about this James Brown set. I need to hear about this. Yeah.
Okay, I went in, and I was aside from the engineer, I was the only pale-faced person there, the only person who suffered from a lack of skin pigmentation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And after the third tune, one of the guys turned to me and said, "You know what? I looked at you and I said that no way when you came in." He says, "But you play pretty good for a white man." And I just cracked up. And I said, "Man, if the tables were turned and a black man walked into a white session," I said, "that I would be taken out in the alley and beaten."
Yeah.
But I tell you, that's one of the nicest things that anybody's ever said to me. And
was it pretty loose? Like, were there any chord charts, or were you just jamming? Like, what was it? What was this? Do you remember what the session was?
There were no chord charts. They would just set up grooves.
So you were kind of playing that Arthur Adams, Larry Carlton kind of wah-wah thing, right? I mean, or was that?
Yeah, just, I was just playing what I played.
I dig.
And trying to fit in and I was listening. The trick on a guitar when you're playing with a band that's playing something that's funky is the bass player listens to the bass drum. The guitar player listens to nothing else but the snare drum. And that's the way that you get a funky groove going. So I concentrated on that snare drum and everything worked out just fine. So by the end of the session, they were calling me the N-word.
Well, you made it then.
Yeah, and I was looking over my shoulder. I said, "Who are you talking?" He says, "You." He says, just because you got that palmolive skin, that doesn't mean anything, man. He says, "You cut us. What color do we all bleed?" And he says, "Well, I don't want to find out, but I would think red." He says, "Yeah, we're all the same under the skin."
That's
so,
right.
Yeah, I can call you that, and I mean it as a term of respect.
I just want to clear this up because this is a great story. The 2 a.m. Club, it appears, was in Mill Valley. That's what I'm looking here.
Oh my God, you're right.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to.
I really haven't seen your moment.
Come on, dude. This is going. You haven't thought about this in a while. So I just want to be clear. But you're pretty confident that the band that you were in with Vincent was in San Francisco proper with Turk, and the bar was down the street from the Chronicle, and the cats like Ralph Gleason or whatever would come. But do you remember the club's name or no?
Obviously not.
Because I got Huey Lewis talking about 40 years ago. The 2 a.m. Club's been around forever. It's still open, but it's in Mill Valley.
I'll make this as quick as possible. I was at the 2 a.m. Club with Huey's brother, Jeff Craig, and I had been drinking all day, and then we got increasingly drunk at the 2 a.m. Club, and we were playing darts. And finally, I said, Jeff, I'm hammered.
Yes.
And this is drunk logic. I looked at Jeff, who was the only other person in the bar who was more drunk than I was, and I said, "Do I look okay to drive?" And Jeff looked at me and said, "Of course. You're not going to."
Of course you do.
Yeah. So that's how I picked up my first DUI.
Well, that's a whole other story. Because
that's a whole other story.
But the truth is that we are a more punitive, in some ways, more punitive society now too. That is another issue. Like where Merle Haggard was making hit records, he got arrested 10 times in the 70s. He was in the hole in San Quentin. Reagan expunged his record. You get a DUI today, your life can be over.
It is. Just one will do it, man.
Talking to Greg Douglas here. I don't think we touched on this in the first interview, but how did you cross paths with Van Morrison?
He was being backed up by Soundhole, who most of them later on.
Dude, are you kidding me? That's Mario Cipollina. That's Bill Gibson. They became the news with Chris Hayes. Go ahead.
That's right. So they had a guy named Brian Marnell who was playing guitar, and he was not fitting in. Van didn't like him. So they called me and said, can you do the gig? I said, I'd love to. And of course, I showed up an hour late. And Van was not happy. He was muttering things like, there's a lot of guitar players who want to get this gig. Who is this guy? What makes him so special that he can show up to my rehearsal an hour late? So I came in, and I could kind of tell he was looking at what I was doing, and he was enjoying it. So I was, I was really, really apologetic, and I was, because it was one of those days where things went wrong. We went on the road. First time I'd been on an airplane.
Wow.
And
In your life.
In my life.
Wow.
Yeah. And we'd gone off the plane, and I'd had a couple drinks, and I told Van a joke that I made up on the plane that I cannot repeat it on this show because it's so vile and so racist and so horrible. It had something to do about what would you get if you crossed Van Morrison with Sly Stone. And I told it to him, and he looked at me, and he started to laugh, and he said, "That is effed up." And he said it in that great Belfast accent.
Yes.
So we get to the hotel. I'm rooming with Bill Gibson, and the phone rings. And Bill answers the phone, and he said, "Hey, it's for you." I said, "Who is it?" He said, "It's Van." And I said, "Really?" So I picked it up. I said, "Van, what's going on, dude?" And he said, "You want to go to dinner?" I said, "Sure. Yeah, let's go to dinner." I said, I looked at Bill, like somebody who just called me from Mars. And they said, "Van wants to go out to dinner."
Yeah, exactly.
So
of course.
we went out, and we had the greatest time, man. He seemed to feel very comfortable with me, and we were telling horrible jokes. This married couple walked over to me. They'd just gotten married, and they walked up to me, and they said, "Hey, Van, we heard that you were in town. Could we get an autograph from you?" And Van looked at me and just broke up, and he said, "Hey, Van, yeah, come on, man. Give him the autograph." Of course, I'm talking.
No, I love it. I love that accent. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, he was cracking up. So I said, "And this guy across from me over there with the red hair, that's Greg Douglas. He's my new guitar player. He's really a pain in the ass, but we're keeping him around because we kind of feel sorry for him.
Yeah.
And he's an okay guitar player, but nobody else will have him. So I hired him, and then we went up to Van's room and watched TV with the sound off and made up our own plots to the TV shows.
This was the first road tour that you went on.
First, before I had ever played on stage with him. So, yeah.
That is epic. I mean, that dude was surly too. I mean, he could fire people on the bandstand, right?
Oh, I know.
I mean, can you talk about, even in, you talk about Miles Davis, you listen to In a Silent Way or Kind of Blue, and then, things like that. But the thing about the jazz musicians that I love is that they're reacting to what they hear. There's just a conversation, and they're listening, constantly listening to each other and playing off each other. When did you get the memo about that? In terms of, like, for you to just fit in and get a compliment from James Brown's band, or Van, you showed up an hour late, but you were just fitting in. Can you talk about how your ears grew and when you realized that the best part about playing in a band is the conversation itself and not just wanking it, like look at me kind of thing? I'm not, I realize that goes on, unfortunately, and there's a lot of people sidemen that just pick up a paycheck and there's just somebody up there just, with their ego fully invested. I just wonder how you cultivated that ability to to listen and then be part of the conversation.
Okay, I'll give you two quick examples because I know that there's a time limit.
No, we're good.
Yeah. First one was John Lee Hooker. He was playing at a small club in Orinda called the Square Rigger, and he was up on stage all by himself. And I was supposed to play with him a month earlier, but I had taken some acid that put me in a state where
you altered. You didn't make the gig.
When the phone call came that John Lee wanted me, or somebody wanted me to sit in with John Lee, I was at the top of a pine tree trying to de-evolve into a monkey so that I could get it right this time. So it wasn't a good time to go jam. A month later, I went down there, and John Lee shook my hand, and you could just tell it was kind of like, oh boy, another white kid wants to be a blues player. And I got up there, and he started playing, and it was like jumping on a moving freight train. The guy had such power. It just was this. It wasn't like Alvin Lee power.
Sure.
It was a power that came from a much deeper, DNA, ancient DNA space. And I grabbed onto that, and I just let it pull me along. And I tried to. Well, actually, I did. I enhanced what he was doing, and it suddenly became this beautiful conversation between two people, not a black blues artist and a kid from the Bay Area. They were two people that were had a lot invested in this musical conversation, and it was complete. It was beautiful. It was.
I want to be clear about the chronology here. You got a second bite at the apple to play with him, even though you were on acid before. You weren't a patron that night. You went around the bandstand with John Lee.
Yeah, I was. I went on stage with him.
Okay.
And it was arranged by other people. John Lee didn't look too happy about it until we got halfway through the first song, and he just, he turned around and gave me that look like, okay, son,
you got it.
Let's do this.
Before that, is it fair to say that was revelatory in the sense that the power and the pulse was so undeniable that it sort of put you into this accompanist mentality of you had not been conversational prior to that. Is that fair to say?
Not on that level.
Yeah, well, not on that level. Yeah.
Not on that level. I was playing with a lot of people who, as you say, were just trying to outdo each other. And John and I were, just thinking about it almost brings tears to my eyes because it was so beautiful. And after we got done, I heard him frantically saying, he said, where is that guitar player? Where is he? Where is he? I have to talk to him. He had a week booked at, The Matrix.
Damn.
In San Francisco.
Yeah.
As a single. He says, I don't want to do it as a single anymore. I want to do it with you. And I was working with Country Weather, and I had to break the news to him. But you know what, Jake? It may not have been as good the second time.
Oh, so you stuck with the band and said, John Lee, I got to take a pass.
I had to.
It doesn't matter. You proved it. You were in the hallucinogenic state before. You kind of screwed up. Then you showed up, killed it with him. Probably that was the way to end it. In hindsight, who knows? Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. The other moment was one of the Tuesday night jam sessions at the Carousel. I got word that Peter Green was playing, and my friends literally physically dragged me down there, and they said, you are playing with Peter Green. You're going to go up on that stage and you're going to play with Peter Green. And I said, I'm not doing it. They just dragged me up there, and I got up there, and I'd been listening to the album Then Play On for the last month. So I knew how Danny Kerwin played, and I knew how he interacted with Peter Green. So I just played rhythm for about 20 minutes.
I love it. I freaking love it.
He turned around and he just kept looking at me and smiling. And finally he came over and started yelling something in my ear. And I thought, oh, this is it. I screwed up. I did. And then he yelled louder. He said, play some lead for fuck's sakes.
He's like, I've run out of ideas. I
Yeah,
need you. Yeah.
he just said, I've been. So, of course, let loose the hounds of hell.
Yeah.
And I just started burning, and he started playing rhythm. And then it was just like we looked at each other like, holy mother of, isn't this great? Isn't this a great moment? And both of us kind of had that same feeling. All of a sudden, everybody in the world started getting on stage. Al Cooper gets up there, and some other guitar player gets up there and starts showing everybody what a great slide player he is. And somebody actually had the nerve to come up and say, there's too damn many people on this stage. And I said, you know what? I agree. There's one too many guitar players. It's me. And I just, I'd already done what I wanted.
Oh yeah, no, you had done your deed,
Yeah. Peter followed me off stage.
Holy cow.
He followed me off stage, we went backstage. He said, you know what? That was so much fun. That was so much more fun than I thought it would be. But he said, I'll tell you what, man, you need to take your moment when it comes. I was trying to tell you that. And finally, I had to come over and scream it in your ear. But don't be such a shrinking violet. And he actually gave me a hug. And it was, and then I heard that he'd gone crazy, and I saw, later on I saw what he'd become, and it broke my heart.
I'm sorry, I'm not hip to that. He kind of had a psychological breakdown?
He went to Germany, and these German rich kids gave him acid. And he's one of those people.
Oh shit! He was one. Those are the horror stories you hear about. He never came back from it.
He never came back. Yeah, some people.
They wind up in their parents' basement. They never leave.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened.
Sucks, man.
He wrote Black Magic Woman, and he refused to collect the Santana royalty checks. He felt it was wrong to make money off of music.
I just want to circle back to the beginning of the conversation about sort of what I was getting at, and not that you're, ensconced in the younger, the carousel ballrooms of today and the jam band scene, but do you set back? Not that there were plenty of egomaniacs in your time, but
oh yeah,
I mean, there was also this. How would you describe your generation of musicians? To me, it can go both ways. Hags would say that, with a few exceptions, there's just been a lot of people that were preaching peace, love, and harmony, and we're all one. They were all full of shit, and they kind of just went all and did their own thing. Guys like Yorma, they have Fur Peace Ranch in Ohio. There are people, I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but like the Cipollininas of the world, the Pete Searses, the Peter Greens, man. I mean, can you just talk about the soul and the fact that, I think this is the better question, about how you guys all recognize that the music was greater than any one person?
Well, first of all, the 60s, the late 60s were a time where, I started off, and this is not false modesty. I really wasn't that great a guitar player, but I was given an opportunity to play on a lot of stages with a lot of different people, and it was marvelous, man. I learned how to play guitar in front of big crowds. And as I said earlier in the interview, we had this wonderful manager, this guy, Bob Strand, who got us on these bookings that were just insane. I would have to go on, go on after Jeff Beck. I had to
Right,
step on
right.
stage. I had to go on stage after Alvin Lee. And, I wasn't just a kid from Contra Costa County, um, sort of competing in that little world, that world of Holy Ghost halls and Elks clubs. I was in the big time.
Yeah, it's called international because those cats
Yes.
were across the pond,
Yeah.
It's
And
unbelievable.
I had to get my shit together. I had to.
Here's the better question. You know what? There were no. I mean, you had to develop a thick skin as well. I just wonder about like if you can just talk to younger cats about not the music. I remember Steve Cropper telling me that one thing about today with some cats, younger cats, is that the music is so precious. They'll spend months fine tuning stuff before they get it out to the people. The technology is advanced, but music in some ways is the only thing that a lot of people have. And your generation struck me because you were busy and you were working and you had to get on stage and you had to have a short memory. The music was never that precious. It was like about burning. It was not about perfection. It was about burning. And maybe you had an off night and maybe you got a critical review in the paper. But you didn't even, you had a, can you just talk about not taking the music too preciously? To me, that is just the biggest drag. You spend 40 minutes working on a bass drum sound or intellectualizing something. You haven't played a damn note. I just want you to riff on that.
Yeah. Country Weather was not about perfection. Believe me. It was about raw energy.
Yeah.
Just right from the get-go. The chemistry of the band was about getting even when we were a band playing at school proms and stuff. We were called the Virtues, and we were doing cover tunes. It was high energy stuff. We were good looking kids. We were good looking guys. So
The ladies were there.
oh yeah, I remember. I was. I may have told you the story in the last interview, but we got matching gold suits, and I remember we were at a battle of the bands, and we'd won so many that we became the special guest. We're out there in our matching gold suits with the black skinny ties. The curtain opens, and it sounded like the Beatles were there. All the girls started screaming. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I said, there goes college. There goes the psychology degree. There goes everything.
Right.
This is what I want to do.
But just talk about having a short memory and making mistakes and realizing that actually can be a gateway towards new musical expansion, expanding songs. I mean, people are way too caught up in this formula trip of having to play things that they say are the right. There are no wrong notes. You just got to find the better notes. That's what your generation exuded, was find the better notes.
Well, Jay, let's face it. We had an audience that was usually very, very high. So
Which is fantastic. That hasn't changed a lot. There's still a lot of anyway,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But we could go off on a tangent,
Sure.
man. We could, if I was having a good night, the rest of the band would step back and let me go for 10 minutes. They let me go off, for 10 minutes. And if somebody else was having a good night, we do the same thing. We kind of, let them have their moment. And you can't do that anymore. Now it's everything has to be a certain way.
See, you're nailing this. There was a fluidity to it where it was like, hey, let them stretch out. But now it's like there's time constraints and go. I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah.
Right. No. It's you're exactly right. Now it's can you guys play something a little faster? The people aren't buying as many drinks as they were 15 minutes ago. Deep inside, I'm going, fuck the people.
That's right, because the musicians have to get off themselves before they can entertain the people.
Yeah.
It's not about entertaining the people, man. Anyway,
I'm not a clown,
Right. I mean, it's also like, you got to it was before we wrap up set 2 here, brother. Is there anything? You know, I've talked to a bunch of cats from your generation, and it's interesting because of the extended pause over the last couple of years. You know, maybe they were kind of content before COVID with their careers, but all of a sudden these sort of wishes and bucket list things sort of came into play. You know, not a lot of things, but is there anything that has sort of cropped up, like that you want to, a musical project or something that you want to put out in the ether that you all of a sudden are kind of horny to do because of this extended pause?
It's a done deal. I had a year, I don't know, year and a half where I had nothing to do. The first, after I memorized the Netflix schedule, I said, you know what? I've got a guitar and an amplifier and a whole bunch of equipment downstairs. I'm going to go down and learn some new stuff. So I sat down with this guy, Sonny Landreth. I sat down with the Sonny Landreth CD and learned his slide technique. And it's something that I never thought I could do. It was a huge breakthrough. And I would just sit down for 4 or 5 hours a day like I did when I was 15 years old because I couldn't leave the house. There was nothing else I could do. So I sat and I learned new things.
Wow.
I went back and learned a whole bunch of Peter Green stuff. I bought this new pedal that is just like, you can get any tone you can think of. You can replicate it. I would sit and replicate. There's a guy named Joe Beck. He is a jazz musician.
Hold on. Rest in peace. The man had a dairy farm in upstate New York as well. I don't know if you knew that or not. Did you meet him ever?
No.
What a character, man. What a beast. Go ahead.
Now, I'd never heard of him until...
Wait, until the pandemic?
Well, yeah. What
I love this, dude.
I've got a guy who is one of my recovery friends who was in the music business. He was a DJ and he also worked for record labels. He's got the greatest vinyl collection. I just go over there. I find excuses to go over to his house and we just sit for hours.
I love this. I freaking love it. And you found which Joe Beck record? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Okay, but you found. You're still always on the pulse, Douglas. Your taste. Who cares that you weren't hip to him? You found him. That dude is ridiculous, man.
And what killed me was not what he was playing, but how it sounded. Oh, man. It was the tone was just thick, but it had this crunchy outside.
I love it, dude. It's like tempura or something, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It was like biting into a California roll.
So wait, I just want to be clear. Obviously, you were hermetically sealed up and learning, but yes. what I'm feeling the crescendo here is that you're really anxious to get out and play a lot of this stuff for the people, like the new stuff you learned.
Well, I got a new band. It's called Greg Douglas and the Sidewinders. And it's all people. We said, we are not going to play Mustang Sally. We're not going to play Brown Eyed Girl. We're not going to play all the crap that we've been requested. We were going to play the music that we want.
Thank you. That, you know what? It's about that. That to me is the turning point. I mean, some people would call it suicide in today's world, but Miles and Lee Morgan and those guys, they would look at the audience, especially when Miles was doing the fusion stuff. I mean, people hated that. Unfortunately, during the time, they didn't understand it. And he basically was like, listen, I dig what I'm doing. I hope you dig what I'm doing. But even if you don't, I'm still going to do it. And I think that to me, when the musicians come at it with original stuff or even obscure covers that people don't hear a lot. But
we open our set with Beck's Bolero.
You know, man, please. So you're going to England with the Miller tribute band. Yeah. When do you have any Sidewinder gigs lined up? Because I'll come to San Diego in a heartbeat, dude.
We are opening for the band doubles as a Pompatus of Love.
Okay, same band.
Yeah, same band, same players. In England, I'm picking up guys who came highly recommended by people like It's a Beautiful Day and Barry Melton. and said they're a great backup band. So I just sent them all the tunes. I said, please learn these. You know, it's a whole bunch of Miller stuff and also a couple of Quicksilver tunes. I love doing
Oh, I love it. Oh,
man.
tribute to Johnny, man, definitely.
Yeah, and I've got that solo down. You know, I just
So
work
you're
with
opening for? When you come back to the States? Do you have any gigs lined up with the Sidewinders?
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, there's a couple of things that are happening. I'm opening at the end of May for oh God, come on, Greg.
Greg, man, Tempura. Come on,
Uh,
California roll, dude.
wow.
2 a.m. club, dude.
No,
We went from John Turk all the way to Chip. We went all over the place today, man.
I know. It's a guy. I should know this.
Okay,
I
so listen,
play-
you know what? Send. Here's the point. It's just when you remember, just send me a message with it. Because I'd love to come and support you and blow out some video of it. You know.
Anyway, his name is Ian, and he played in my memory shot for the day.
It's fine.
Anyway, yeah, I'll email that to you. This is really
No, I'm
embarrassing.
going to edit this out. No, it's not a dude. Douglas, it is so great. We're going to do another episode. It just keep to me like the show is just continuing to 11 years in, and there's so much content, and there's so many provocative characters. But before I let you go, you know who I just did 2 interviews with, and I wasn't sure if you had a chance to work with him on with the Miller stuff. Was Gary Malaber.
Yeah,
Okay, a great cat. Did you cook the groove with him on like Jungle Love and stuff like that?
yeah. Oh yeah. No, I worked a lot with Gary. I worked with Gary about 5 years ago with the Electric Flag.
Whoa,
We played in Quebec. He was playing drums, and Nick Gravenitis was playing the guitar and singing, and Barry Goldberg was on
dude,
keyboards.
I'm loving this contingent of Electric Flag.
Oh, it was
Was Harvey
it was
Brooks in the band?
killer.
Was Harvey Brooks playing or no?
No,
Yeah,
no. We had there was some other bass player from LA
yeah.
who was just great, and it was a fabulous gig. 2 nights, two sold out nights in Quebec.
The being in the studio with Steve Miller and like what is that like? I mean, was that like first take and we're done? I mean, was there a lot of I mean, you didn't necessarily have um constraints. I'm sure you had budgets. There was, I mean, you didn't have constraints about studio time per se, but I just wonder, like, when you talk about making a hit, isn't that normally like done on the first take or second take? You don't have to do 45 takes of a song. Yeah, I
Yep.
mean, can is that kind of the methodology that you guys had, especially with Miller going into the studio?
Well, I tell you, Jungle Love, and that's probably what'll end up on my tombstone. No name guy who wrote Jungle Love is down
Douglas
there.
Love, man,
Yeah.
Douglas Love.
So I got a
Terry and the
phone call.
Pirates might show up on the gravestone too.
Well, that's possible. Way at the bottom. Uh,
I
and
dig.
there'll be a bunch of cut off straws by them.
Absolutely.
We so anyway, I got a call from Steve, who heard the demo of Jungle Love, and he said, "You know what? Lonnie waited till the last second to give this to me. Where are you? We need to put it on the record." And I said, "Well, I'm in Sausalito." And he says, "Well, lucky you. So are we. How long will it take you to get to the record plant?" And I said, "I don't know, 10 minutes, maybe 15, counting time to load up my stuff." So I was there in 15 minutes, unloaded my stuff, we played the demo, and we cut it. Got halfway through, Lonnie made a clam, made a mistake.
Wow.
Steve just lit into him and says, "You never stop. You never stop. You can always fix the mistake." So we did another take, and we took the first part of the first take and the second part of the second take, edited them together. The whole thing took a half an hour. And here I am 50 years later, still paying the mortgage
Dude,
with with that song.
Larry Murphy Sr. looking down on us. Greg Douglas, always such an honor to talk to you, man, and be safe overseas. And let's try to catch a hang this summer, or
Let's do that, Jake. I would love nothing better, man.
Yeah, man.
Then I can really then I can really cuss.
Hey, then we'll get that joke that you told Van when you got off the plane. We'll break it all down.
Okay, yeah.
I'm sure you know that, but it's just really interesting because we got into this Van Morrison thing, and then you dropped the John Lee Hooker story, and Van Morrison got on his knees for John Lee Hooker, man. He obsessed about John Lee Hooker, man, when he saw him in Berkeley.
Yeah.
All right, bro. Much love. Have a beautiful week, end of the weekend, and we'll be in touch.
Jake, it's always an honor to do this show, man. I love it, and I love you, and
we'll keep it happening.
Let's do it again, and I hope to see you in the flesh this summer.
No doubt, man. Much love.
All right, my friend.
Be cool.
I will.
Later.
I'll do my best.
Always. Peace.
Okay. All right, man.
Yeah,
bye.
Bye. Set 2 in the books with Greg Douglas. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll be back tomorrow, and then we're hitting the road. Until then, peace.